You're listening to a Brooklyn Nets episode of the Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the team's latest goings-on as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Nets fans! Welcome to my 2021-22 Brooklyn Nets season preview here on the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. If you'll recall last year, the way that I did this was I went through the starting lineup, then the bench, then the reserves. I thought that was the best way to do it. I still think that's the best way to do it. So let's jump right into it with the starting point guard of the Nets. You know him. You love him. It's James Harden. You can make the argument that Harden was the most valuable Net last year. The way he made his teammates better, the way that he took a step back so that guys like Durant and Kyrie and Harris could really thrive. The Nets were winning games with Harden and the role players that the Nets have. They really weren't doing that when it was just Durant or just Kyrie. I love James Harden. I did backflips when the Nets traded for him. I'm a little concerned that he didn't sign an extension, but nothing's stopping him from signing an extension in the summer. So I don't want to think about that. Quite honestly, if the Nets win the NBA Finals this year and Harden walks, I'd be okay with it because the Nets won a title. I think he will re-sign. I think he likes playing with Durant. I think he likes what the Nets have cooking. He wanted to be a Net. He was very adamant about that. Get me out of Houston. Get me to Brooklyn. I love Harden. I think he's going to be a Net long term. He's got to change his game a little bit. Harden was more of a distributor with the Nets than he was a scorer. He was still getting his. He was just primarily looking to pass rather than score. I want him to call his own number more. Now that Kyrie Irving isn't going to play for the foreseeable future, James Harden really needs to be the second best scorer on the Nets. It can't be Joe Harris. It can't be LaMarcus Aldridge. It can't be Blake Griffin. It has to be Harden. Realistically, he needs to put up like 28 points a game. And I don't think that's unreasonable considering his last 3 full seasons with the Rockets, he put up over 30 points a game and won back-to-back-to-back scoring titles. That's what you need to know about James Harden. Now, I'll say this. I don't know if this is going to be the starting lineup tonight. It's very possible that Steve Nash does something different. I'm going off what NBC Sports Edge has. And you know what? It seems realistic, so I'll roll with it. They have Joe Harris as the starting shooting guard. I have no problem with that. I'd rather have him on the bench since he's a microwave three-point shooter. I think that's the best role for him, but I'm fine with him starting. He started last year, and the Nets won 48 games. They would have won over 50 in a full season, so I'm fine with Harris starting. We know the story of Joe Harris, one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. He actually led the NBA in three-point percentage last year. He shot 47.5% from beyond the arc. He put up 14.1 points per game. He was absolutely lethal. Then, in the playoffs, he fell off a cliff. He only had 2 games where he scored more than 14 points. I mean, go back to that Bucks series. Game 3. If Joe Harris hits just 2 more threes, or even 1 more three, and 1 more mid-range jumper, the Nets win Game 3, and they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. Game 7, if Harris hits 1 more three, the Nets are in the Eastern Conference Finals. In the last 5 games against the Bucks, he only scored 35 points. That is 7 points per game. He shot 26.5% from the field and 24.2% from beyond the arc. Why do you think I was okay with the Nets trading him? Now I'm glad they didn't, because they don't have Kyrie. But Joe Harris needs to get his act together in the playoffs if the Nets are going to compete. Harris had a really good series against the Celtics, and the Nets dominated that series. They won it in 5 games. He had a dreadful series against the Bucks, and they lost in 7. There's a connection there, let me tell you. Kevin Durant, you don't need me to tell you anything about him. He's arguably the best player in the NBA today. The only issue with him is health. He only played in 35 games last year, but since more time has elapsed following his devastating Achilles injury, you know he's going to play in more games. Realistically, he can put up like 30 points per game this year. Without Kyrie taking those shots, some of them are going to go to Harden, some of them are going to go to Durant, some will be scattered to other guys, but you know that Durant is going to carry the lion's share of scoring responsibility. And I have no problem with that because he's Kevin Durant. He was a fraction of an inch away from single-handedly beating the Bucks in Game 7. If Durant had been just an inch back, even less, that shot becomes a three-pointer. Durant hits it. The game never goes into overtime. And the Nets win it right then and there. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Nets would have destroyed the Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals. and they would have destroyed the Suns in the NBA Finals. That loss to the Bucks is without question the most devastating playoff loss in Nets history. I'm not blaming Durant for it. It was a really tough ask for him to beat the Bucks by himself with a hobbled Harden, no Kyrie, an off-his-game Harris, playing every minute. That's tough. I love Durant. I'm not blaming him by any stretch. He's arguably the best player in the NBA. How can I get mad at Durant? I love Durant. How can you not? At the 4 will be Blake Griffin. Griffin did a good job with the Nets. Put up 10 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game, 2.4 assists per game. Shot 49.2% from the field, 38.3% from beyond the arc. He looked like an incredibly different player from the player that he was with the Pistons to the player that he was with the Nets. See what being a winning organization can do? It can motivate these players to play their tails off. I mean, Griffin was diving for every loose ball. He didn't need to do that. He proved that he can still dunk, was a high-energy guy. I really liked what he brought to the Nets. I'm looking for him to put up about 13 points per game this year. At center, it's kind of interesting. NBC Sports Edge has Nick Claxton starting. Not what I would do if I was Steve Nash, but I don't hate it. I like Claxton. Good player. Had a solid sophomore season. He got better in every area. Is he the weak link in the starting 5? No question. But the center has never been less important in the NBA than it is right now. So, I'm okay with Claxton as the starting center. I think he'll be okay. Let's say 10 points a game. Maybe 8 rebounds per game. A block and a half per game. I can live with that. I don't know if he's going to get most of the minutes, though. Just because he's starting doesn't mean he's going to play more than a guy like Aldridge. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. The backup point guard is Patty Mills. A guy who, admittedly, I wasn't crazy about. But now that Kyrie's out, I get it. You're bringing in another scorer, someone who will hit a bunch of his free throws, knows how to win. He won an NBA title in 2014. Sean Marks obviously knows him very well from their days together in San Antonio. Obviously, with Kyrie out, you lose a ton of scoring. Patty Mills will help replace that. Quite honestly, I was a little surprised to see him not in the starting lineup. I'd rather see Mills than Harris. If I was Steve Nash, my starting lineup would be Harden, Mills, Durant, Griffin, Aldridge. And I feel like I'd run either a 9 or 10-man rotation with Harris, Brown, Millsap, and Aldridge coming off the bench. Maybe Cam Thomas also. Maybe. Maybe I'd look to give him like 8 to 10 minutes per game. See what he could do. Now, interestingly, NBC Sports Edge has someone who I didn't even mention as the Nets' backup shooting guard. It's a friend of Kyrie Irving's. They went to the same high school. DeAndre Bembry. Kind of hard to get excited about Bembry. Last year for the Raptors, he put up 5.7 points per game, 2.9 rebounds per game, 2.1 assists per game, and a steal per game. He's a very good defender. Can guard multiple positions. And we all know that the Nets love to switch everything. Bembry does fit that pretty darn well. It's just hard to get really excited about him. In a perfect world, he's not playing a ton. And I think the Nets know that, because seemingly he'd be in line to fall out of the rotation if Kyrie got vaccinated. Kyrie would play the 2, Harris would move to the backup 2, Bembry would be out of a rotation spot. At backup small forward is one of my favorite players. Really like this guy. Really like watching him play. He's the answer to a great trivia question. Who's the only Net to score in overtime in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Bucks? It's Bruce Brown. Brown played like all 5 positions for the Nets. Last year he played the 1, he played the 2, he played the 3, he even played the 4 and the 5. The smallest center ever, 6'4", 202 pounds, and he's playing center. Very tenacious. Has a great ability to sneak in on rebounds, on missed 3-pointers, and either put the ball in or gather the ball. Really good perimeter defender. Underrated interior scorer. Sean Marks has done a lot of fantastic things as Nets GM. But one really good move that's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle is the addition of Bruce Brown. I really, really like him. At power forward is Paul Millsap. Someone who I've been critical of a lot on this show. Here's a guy who the Nuggets really needed to have step up, and he really didn't. Like, he signed a big contract with the Nuggets, did nothing for him. I mean, I really wasn't crazy about the Nets bringing him in, but then I thought about it. If he comes off the bench and plays like 20 minutes per game that way, as opposed to starting, maybe, just maybe, Millsap can work. I mean, Millsap is a talented player. 4-time All-Star, made an all-defensive team. Last year he shot 47.6% from the field. He's not a terrible player. And I think he can work with the Nets. You've just got to use him the right way. Have him come off the bench. Have him contribute that way. Have him be a role player. not like the best or second best player on the floor. I think Millsap can do that, and he'll give you good defense. It can work. I'm not crazy about Millsap, but I see the logic. At backup center is LaMarcus Aldridge. I was so happy to see him re-sign with the Nets. It's great to see him back in the NBA after he was forced to retire last year after suffering from an irregular heartbeat. In 5 games with the Nets, he was great. Was excellent offensively, hit a ton of his shots. Great defensively also, put up over 2 blocks per game. Willing passer, great floor stretcher. LaMarcus Aldridge fit the Nets perfectly. Make no mistake about it, if LaMarcus Aldridge had stayed healthy, the Nets beat the Bucks in Game 7. Hell, they beat the Bucks in Game 3. That's how important Aldridge was to the Nets. I think he's going to be a really good Net this year. I'm expecting big things from Aldridge this year. It wouldn't surprise me if he put up like 15 points per game. He's that talented. Like, as we get more into the season, I could see us saying that LaMarcus Aldridge is the 4th best player on the team, behind Durant, Harden, and Harris. That's how high Aldridge's ceiling is. You can't say enough good things about him. Now on to the reserves. I'll start with Jevon Carter. Maybe not the easiest guy in the world to get behind. He just doesn't play a flashy game. There's no question that he struggled to find his footing in the NBA. But he's a really good perimeter defender. One of the biggest issues the Nets had last year was on defense. Jevon Carter will help solve that. I don't think you'll see a ton of Carter this year. Maybe you'll see a little bit of him. I mean, it all depends on injuries, but I think you'll be impressed at his defense. There's a role for Carter in the league. He's a 3rd stringer on a great team. A decent backup for a lesser team. That brings us now to Cam Thomas, the first of the 5 rookies that Sean Marks drafted this year. I thought Thomas should have been taken a lot higher than 27. I thought it was a great pick. Thomas really impressed in the Summer League. I understand that it doesn't mean much, but he played well enough to be on the first team. That's not bad. He played well in the preseason. I mean, for goodness sake, he led the Summer League in scoring. He was a co-MVP along with Davion Mitchell. He has talent. He has potential. Unfortunately for him, he's on a team with title aspirations. So it's going to be tough for him to get consistent minutes. I'll say this though. Depending on injuries, it's possible that Thomas gets extended playing time. And he certainly has the ability to seize upon that playing time and make it so Steve Nash can't take those minutes away from him. I like Thomas. I think he has a really good future in this league. That brings us now to James Johnson. A guy who was brought in to be a physical presence, an agitator, a bully. He's the guy who you bring in when you see a guy like Patrick Beverley or someone like that roughing up Durant or roughing up Harden. You bring in Johnson, and he'll settle things down. That's his role on this team. He's not going to get a ton of playing time. He's not a bad two-way player. There are worse things than James Johnson playing 15 to 20 minutes per game for the Nets. I just don't think you'll see it. He's the guy who you're going to bring in if you see your team being pushed around and someone's talking smack. You bring in Johnson, you say, go after this guy, or send a message, and Johnson will do that. I have no problem with having a guy like that. None whatsoever. Day'Ron Sharpe was the second rookie that Sean Marks took in this past draft. The Nets were supposedly really high on him all throughout the process. I like Sharpe. I think he has potential. The thing is, though, the Nets are supposedly really high on his shooting ability. Like, they think he can turn into a good shooter. I didn't see that from him for his 1 year with the Tar Heels. He only attempted 2 3-pointers. He missed them both. He hit just 51 of his 101 free throws. You want to try to develop Sharpe's shot in the G League? Go for it. But Sharpe may just top out as a backup old school center. I'm okay with that personally. I just know that the Nets won't be okay with that. That's what concerns me. Sharpe may have been drafted by the wrong team. The Nets do have a couple guys on two-way contracts. The first one is David Duke Jr. He got the second two-way spot over Devontae Kakak. I mean, give Duke credit. Here's a guy who was an undrafted free agent. No one had any expectations for him. Didn't exactly set the world on fire when he was at Providence, but he really impressed the Nets. He impressed their coaching staff, and he earned his way onto the team via a two-way contract. That's a very easy story to get behind. I'm rooting for Duke. He's not going to get a ton of playing time, but I hope that he shows people around the NBA that he has what it takes to play in this league. I'll be rooting hard for him, let me tell you. And I like what he said about his name. David Duke is a former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. When the Nets is David Duke, why he doesn't go by a different name, he basically said, why do I have to change my name? Why does hate have to triumph? Why doesn't he change his name? I want to become so great that when you Google my name, I'm what comes up first, not him. Fantastic job by the Nets' David Duke. That's like the perfect answer. Kessler Edwards was the third of the 5 rookies that the Nets drafted. The 4th and 5th were Marcus Zegarowski and Raekwon Gray. Presumably, they're going to spend the year with the Long Island Nets. I like Edwards. Dominated at Pepperdine. Earned very high marks in the WCC. He was on their all-freshman team in 2019. He was second-team all-WCC in 2020. Last year, he was first-team all-WCC. Really good defender. Can guard multiple positions, just like Bembry and Blake Griffin. I'm not in love with his mechanics. And he didn't have a good combine. Also, he played at Pepperdine. Kind of hard to measure him against NBA talent. At the combine, his chance to impress, he failed. But Edwards has the tools necessary to develop into a solid NBA player. I like that pick. You'll notice that I skipped over someone, even though I've mentioned him quite a few times. It's time to address the elephant not in the room, Kyrie Irving. I'm not going to spend too much time on him. Quite frankly, I'm sick of talking about him. I'll just say this. The Nets are handling it the right way. He can't be a part-time player. That's ridiculous. You're either all in or you're all out. I give Kyrie credit for trying it, A for effort. But I'm glad that the Nets said no. I'm glad that they're putting their foot down. I'll say this. I don't think he's going to miss the whole year. Do I think he's going to get vaccinated? No. But I think the mandate can change. New York City is getting a new mayor on January 1st. Odds are it's going to be Eric Adams. He's made comments basically saying that Kyrie will be able to play at some point in time next calendar year. Now, it'll be interesting to see how the Nets deal with that. Do they welcome him back with open arms? How long is it going to take for him to be ramped back up? Is he traded before then? It's a crazy situation. I hate talking about it. But I do think that Kyrie will play at some point in time for the Brooklyn Nets. If you listen to my NBA preview, I said that I think the Nets could win the NBA Finals. It depends on Kyrie. I think they're winning the East. That's not the issue. The issue is the Lakers. If Kyrie plays, the Nets beat the Lakers. If he doesn't, I think it's 2002 all over again. If Kyrie Irving costs the Nets an NBA title, I'm going to be furious. You'll get a Brooklyn Nets show Monday night. Week after that, you'll get an Islanders show. Week after that, you'll get a Nets show, etc., etc. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.